Hello, welcome to this webinar on how flexibility and innovation can attract nurses to the NHS. We'll focus today on recruitment, training, and retention. Let us start with introductions first, and then, led by our panelists, consider the following three parts. We're going to be looking at challenges in part one. Part two is on innovation and flexibility, and part three in moving forward. We will conclude this webinar with reflections from the panelists and a summary of the key points raised by me, your host. Firstly, I'll introduce myself as the webinar host and then ask our panelists to do the same. My name is Dr. Helena Ann Mitchell, known to many of my colleagues as just Ann Mitchell. I started my nurse career as a mental health nurse and practitioner, moving into nurse education in 1988 at University College Northampton and then the Open University. I completed a PhD in the University of Surrey and continued my research interests as a participatory action research. And these interests center around ethnic minority groups, now known as our global majority, which is the preferred new term. Prior to retiring from the OU in 2021, I led a British Academy project that studied community mental health resilience in diverse and culturally complex communities. However, I've remained with the Open University as an honorary associate, undertaking PhD student supervision and research activity, which is why I'm hosting today's webinar. It's important now for me to just tell you a little bit about the other work I've been doing. I joined the RCM Mental Health Forum in 2021, taking on an activist role as chair of the RCM Mental Health Forum Global Majority and Ethnic Minority Subgroup. This has been pivotal in addressing inequality in mental health healthcare provision and the training and leadership development of ethnic minority mental health nurses. I'm also a member of the Mental Health Nurse Academic Group UK that represents 65 UK universities, including the RCN, promoting research, education, and value-based practice. In recognition of all the work I have been doing at the RCN, they gave me an award as a committee member of the year 2023 and highly commended me for the outstanding work in supporting the organization and its members. I will now ask each panelist to introduce themselves formally by a brief synopsis of the webinar and overview of the NHS long-term workforce plan, which is to form the basis of our webinar today. So I'll start with Lisa Gammon. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good morning, Anne. My name is Lisa Gammon. I have been a registered general nurse since 2000 and have worked within the NHS since registration, qualification and registration. Very proud to be a nurse, and as my career has grown, I have developed and had the opportunity after 10 years to come out of the clinical area and use my knowledge and skills to work alongside students and learners as part of the professional practice, education and training team within Northamptonshire Healthcare Foundation Trust. I work very closely with universities to support nursing education as well as AHP education, and apprenticeships became front and centre in 2017, and our trust's work with the Open University and apprenticeships has grown since we've been working with them. Since 2017, we had 2 initial apprentices, and we have now more than 70 nursing apprenticeships on programme. So very, very proud to be part of the partnership.
Now I move on to Nerys Bolton.
I am the Associate Head of School for Curriculum and Innovation at the Open University, and I'm also the Apprenticeship Lead for the school as well. I've worked for the Open University since 2017. Prior to that, I worked at a local university. I qualified in 1999 and have worked in adult nursing through that, working in renal medicine and intensive care and transplantation.
I will now go on to just give you a very brief update of the NHS workforce plan, long term workforce plan, which was introduced in 2023. And it outlines the first ever, for me, ambitious program of recruitment, staff retention, and training. The plan aims to grow the NHS permanent workforce by 73% to 2.2 to 2.3 million in 2020, 37, which will enable the NHS to deliver more preventative and proactive care across the NHS, the organisation, by, as I said, 2036-37. It is a 2.4 billion investment, and it has some very positive features, particularly mental health, because that's the field of work that I've been in. And they're going to invest in mental health nursing. And the other great shift and of it is in actually prevention work. So I think that it's got some very positive aspects to this plan. However, like any plan, there also could be deficits when you think about it, or areas possibly that is missing from the plan. And for me, one of it is about training and recruitment takes time, and the impact of that workforce is likely to take a long time to be realized. So, in the short and medium term, the NHS is going to have to continue to rely on temporary staff, especially in mental health services, where recruitment from overseas nurses is difficult because of the differences in practice. So that's the first area I think really will need to be looked at. And the second thing is that further long-term sustainable funding will be required to bring those views for staff to staff services. It will take time in order to be able to do this. And the other thing about the plan is really about the challenges. If you're going to increase the workforce, you're going to need to increase all the practice staff in order to support students within specific areas. And that I felt hasn't really been thought through as well. So while it's positive, there are lots of areas I felt that needed further development. So that then will take me on for us to then look at the questions. What have been some of the challenges faced by the NHS in England when it comes to recruiting, training, and retaining nurses?
Thanks, Anne, and I totally agree with you with regards to the long-term plan. It's ambitious, and I think it needs to be ambitious, and that's my starting point. Um, a report from the RCN back in November 2022 highlighted the short-term implications of the nursing workforce, and by 2025 we're going to be, compared to today, 2,000 nurses short in terms of who's qualifying and registering. And subsequent reports have also told us that that number, that gap is going to grow. So we definitely need this framework and this commitment, this political commitment from the government to demonstrate how we're going to support our health and social care sector. So that I think that's a huge challenge to start with, and they've taken the first step. The policymakers and the government have taken the first step to show their commitment to that. And you are absolutely right, Anne. Nursing, it requires the skill development and the diversity and the complexity and the changes in our healthcare system and people and in the healthcare, a growing elderly and ageing population and the complexity of their health and social care needs. So nursing is so diverse. It's no longer a medical model. Nurses have to diversify once they've completed their pre-registration training. And that can take up to 4 years with the initial training to get them to where our professional regulator, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, need them to be, and where you as a university and other universities around Great Britain need them to be. So ready for practice, but for them to be practice ready for the workforce, they need extra time during that preceptorship period to consolidate those skills and then gain confidence, gain their competence within their specialist area. So we are looking at a 4 to 5 year journey. It's not a quick fix. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we're facing at the moment. There are lots of other challenges, but for me, that's that projection. We have to have short-term solutions, mid-term solutions, and longer-term solutions, and we have to benchmark and measure those changes as we move forward.
Thank you, Lisa. I'll move on to you now, Nerys. Um, what would you like to add to this question?
Thank you, Anna. I mean, I think I can only echo both of your comments. Really, I think it is absolutely ambitious what they're setting out, and the ramifications need to be thought through, like you say, Lisa. You know, it's not just about recruiting the students in order for them to qualify. It's, you know, making sure that the resources are there to support students when they're out in practice, that the practice areas are up and ready to support potentially increased number of students that they'll be receiving. You know, it's about, like I say, the preceptorship. You know, so it's not just about getting bums on seats. You know, it's huge ramification, because, you know, for yourself, Lisa, you know, you've got to make sure that the infrastructure is there, you know, that you're recruiting those students either internally or externally. So how do you market that, linking into the universities? Because we've also got to look at our resources. You know, we've got to see, you know, we're going to go from X number of students we recruit to this number, you know. So what for us, that's looking at how many, you know, practice tutors we have to support the students, you know, our colleagues within the university to support the students, recruitment and selection, like you say, Anne, you know, that's a huge resource intensive you know, process that we all have to go to. So, you know, that time that we have to spend recruiting, interviewing, you know, Lisa and I obviously are very embedded in the apprenticeship program. So you're looking at, you know, the compliancy that we have to go through. That in itself is time consuming. You know, so as much as I embrace this workforce plan, I think it's well needed, and certainly a good time for us to start looking at all of this. I think, like you say, how we're going to need a lot of time in order to embed this. And I think my final point really is working even more closely with our stakeholders, so people like Lisa, so that we can respond to them. You know, what is it that they need from us? How can we support them? How can we, you know, look at the marketing to get these students on board as well? So you know, I think really exciting. You know, we're already looking at how we as a university can support the increase in students, but it always has to be couched with this kind of, okay, so what are the pinch points? What are the negative sides of these things that we can flip from being negative to being positive? You know, so, you know, it's a lot of things to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, heartful point. Very in-depth points you've made. Nerys, yes, I absolutely agree. It isn't an overnight quick fix, definitely. Thank you. And to some extent, the second question, I think you've sort of partly answered it. So perhaps if you just want to briefly summarize your points here, what, in your view, does the NHS long term workforce plan aim to do? And what are your reflections on it?
The current climate that nurses are working in is very stressful. And I don't mean to minimise that at all. You know, there's news articles of nurses leaving still, and the shortfall of nurses out there. So with reports that are published like this, from talking to colleagues, there is that apprehension about, okay, well, how do we manage this? We do want to increase our workforce. We want to have there's more nurses around. But when they're already stretched and, working under pressure, and then we add that layer of recruiting and supporting students, and then, that kind of transition from student to nurse, that increases the stress levels of my colleagues out there. So I think it's about the work that we do, the communications that we have, the support that we can offer, listening to what's currently out there, and how we can then bring these students in. Because also, and I think I know we're going to talk about this later, and there's a lot of political, economic struggles out there as well. So, it's about working collegiately and looking at the bigger picture when it comes to the workforce plan, which I agree, and I don't think is completely addressed all of the issues that are out there as well. So, I think that's my reflection on it. It's a great piece, but there's so much more that we need to think about.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Totally, again, I agree with you for the stress and the issues arising from them not wanting to stay in the job, even though they love the job. They still want to leave because they can't cope with the pressures and the shortages of staff, actually, that while they're working, while they're on a busy acute ward, they can't handle it. So it's those issues. And I do think that the plan hasn't fully thought that one through. They said in the plan they're going to give them a voice, but they haven't said how. And that's been my main concern. So thank you for that, Nerys. So it's now to you, Lisa, to add it. What would you like to add to this?
If I can build on what Nerys has just been talking about, and I'm picking up on your point there about the voice. So, nurses and healthcare practitioners as change agents, being part of the system of change, being recognised, I think the long-term workforce plan, for me, it sets out the stall and the ambition that change is needed. It sets out that the nursing workforce is a stakeholder in partnership with the government, in partnership with the academic institutions and the universities and education providers, in partnership with the trusts and in partnership with our patients. That's absolutely key, because they are the biggest stakeholder within the whole system. And they're the people that receive the care that we're all working to grow and develop. I totally agree with you. There's things to think about, but bringing back my reflections, bringing back to what you mentioned earlier on in the conversation around flexibility and innovation, and absolutely, they are the two key words that factor in with the long-term plan. There's a lot of words in the long-term plan around growth and around development, and that's got to be with the people. That's got to be with the people in the system. The impact's got to be positive with that. And we've got to see innovation. We've got to see flexibility now. We can no longer afford to think, as we have thought in the past, expecting a different outcome. We've got to put in a different intervention, different ways of thinking, different ways of doing things to receive a different impact. And we want that impact to be a virtuous circle. So again, I think the long-term plan sets out that framework, and there's monitoring in there, there's resource in there, there'll be toolkits in there. So for me, I'm very excited about it. I do understand its limitations, and I do recognise that. But I am looking forward to seeing this unravel in the final 20 years of my career. And I'll still be watching, because as part of my career, I'll be working with people who'll be looking after me in 20 years. So that's going to be my reward, what value it will bring to me. But that's my personal reflections
Thank
on the
you.
long term.
Thank you for sharing those. And there are some similarities with what Larissa said to some extent. But I like the fact you talked about this virtuous circle, yeah, and the reality of having what they're saying they're going to provide for us. Why do shortages sometimes emerge in higher education cold spots? And I'll put that first to Nerissa again because it's looking at the higher education cold spots.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is not anything new. From when I did my nurse training, and but I think these days it's something that as universities we want to try and address. The cold spots where people aren't necessarily supposed to go to universities. And we have to remember that we are still, as I mentioned before, and in this uncertainty, of potentially change of governments and what that might bring. We've got interrelated economic issues that we're currently dealing with, market issues, and obviously policies. We offer at the OU a blended programme with both Oxford as well as Middlesex and the University of West of England. And the students that we recruit there talk about, okay, well, how do I get to placement? If I have to come to the university, where do I stay? Who's going to pay for my accommodation? How many hours a week am I expected to be going to placements? And because of the requirements that we have within the nursing programme regarding, the variety of placements, the variety of specialisms that they need to do, sometimes it's so difficult to try and manage those. We want to be flexible. We want to be able to support these students in order to carry on working and to undertake their education. But some of these students come with, families, carer issues. They're not able to necessarily do what we want them to do in order to meet the requirements. And as universities and working alongside people like Lisa in her role, how can we support these students who weren't meant to go to university, come from very deprived areas, but want to better themselves, want to get into nursing, want to, be role models for their children or, other people? How can we support them? And it's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and say that we've got all the answers. We do spend a lot of time trying to retain our students on the programme, as you well know, Anne. It's really important that once we get them, we try our best to keep them on the programme, but it's not easy, is it? So we've got to embrace, in a way, we've got to embrace those cold spots.
Hand over to Lisa now to get her perspective from the trust, yeah, the trust side of this. Oh,
Okay, so if I open with a thought, a reflection, nursing happens. It's an occupation that happens in the real world, and the real world changes minute by minute. So the education that we need our nursing workforce to have is unbelievably invaluable, and should be part of that journey for our students to get to that qualification and registration. But nursing is lifelong, learning is lifelong. Everything is different from even from that day of qualifying and registering. We continue to learn. And I think, and I'm going to take that point back to the day we start school, and bring that into educational cold spots. So it's changing, I think, helping people to change their beliefs and think differently, that you don't have to qualify at 21 in university with a degree and then come into nursing and carry on from there. People who are more mature can join the nursing workforce and become a nurse at 50, and let's even be really ambitious at 60. because people still have something to contribute. Of course, we want younger people in to see their career in health and social care, and we welcome that as well. But it's about lifelong learning. North Northamptonshire is one of the government's designated 55, one of those cold spots for education. And there's a lot we can do, even today, to change that. Northamptonshire, part of our integrated care system, we have a careers academy that's been set up, and our trust in particular, we have a work experience programme. We work in partnership with other providers in Northamptonshire, offering work experience to younger people and to people preparing to go to university into professional health and social care education. We're proud to do that. We in-reach into schools to go in and to share what we do and to share the roles that we have. So we can make a difference, and we're starting to make a difference to change hearts and minds. And I think that piece of work is also going on with the piece of work that's happening now in response to the long-term plan, and apprenticeships becoming more front and centre.
This next question is about barriers to people coming to work in the health sector. Lisa, what do you think?
Well, I think the most obvious one, and is going to be finance. Um, the changes in the education system since around 2017, with the introduction of student loans into health and social care programmes as their degree level, it's placed a massive barrier on people who are financially challenged, who cannot give up a job in order to come back to university, to study, to become a nurse. They have a mortgage to pay, they have families to feed. That's a huge challenge, and that's the number one barrier that we're facing today, I think.
I absolutely agree on that. Okay,
Yeah.
Nerys, do you want to just give maybe a
Yeah, I mean,
barrier?
I absolutely agree that the finance side of things, it is absolutely huge. But going back to one of Lisa's earlier points, I think it's about what nursing can offer. You know, it's not just as it was when I did my nurse training. I just did a diploma in nursing, and there were no other options. That was it. If you wanted to be a nurse, that's the course that you went. But now, you know, there's foundation degrees, there's nursing associates, there's a full nursing degree. You know, there's even, you know, qualifications that, though won't make you a nurse, will give you the health and social care, you know, knowledge and understanding. So there's loads of other ways that you can do what you need to do. And I think it's talking to potential applicants, like, well, I don't want to do this, I want to do this, but you know, what impact will doing a 4-year program have on doing a 2-year program? And I think it's about us trying to break down those barriers of the choices and the options, and being able to do what they want to be able to do.
We move on then to part two, which is innovation and flexibility. So the first question, and this is to Nerys, why is flexible delivery key to solving some of these challenges?
I think, for me, I think it's fundamentally important. I mean, we've spent quite a bit of time already talking about addressing the barriers that people face when wanting to come and do a nursing program, and I think offering that flexibility, which isn't, you know, it's not completely flexible, because obviously there is all the requirements that they need to meet. They need to be able to do the placements and do the hours and do the theory. But if we can offer the flexibility in conjunction with the organisations that we're working with, in order to look at, okay, well, how do we manage the placements? How do we manage in the apprenticeship programme doing the off-the-job learning? How can we support the students to succeed? You know, by offering that flexibility with, you know, when you engage in the learning, when you can switch on your computer and talk to a librarian at 2 o'clock in the morning if you want to, you know, those things do help break down that stigma about having to do a program that is full time. So I think the delivery is so important.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And Lisa?
I think absolutely. I think the ability, that flexibility to, and the capacity to adapt to an ever changing situation in the educational system, it is absolutely wonderful to hear. And we have first hand knowledge of our students having the app on their phones, using that half an hour that they've got to do some of the reading. It's just wonderful to hear because they're able to use that flexibility to manage their own work-life balance. And that's absolutely key. And when we look at generational characteristics of our different people in the system who are training and being educated to become registered practitioners, we need to have that breadth of delivery in terms of education and that support to meet the needs of those individuals.
So, how do innovations such as inquiry based learning help with nurse education? And I'm going to start again with Nerys.
Well, I think the conversation that we've just had, Anne, links really
Mm-hmm.
nicely to this, to be honest,
Yeah.
because, inquiry based learning is led by our students. We want them to develop their knowledge, their understanding, their clinical skills, and linking into that age old statement that we make, that link between theory and practice, and that gap that it is often talked about. And I think with the inquiry based learning that we offer, it is focused on the stakeholders, the students, the service user, the patient, their
Mm-hmm.
family. What is it that they need to go away and look and read and learn about in order to improve the practice that they give, the knowledge that they have, but also understanding again the diverse nature of the service users that we come in contact with, to be able to understand that it's one size doesn't fit all when it comes to nursing practice. You have to adapt how you present things, how you communicate, how you link in family members. And so inquiry based learning is very much focused on that. We give them patient scenarios with the families tied into that and get them to work through using their own knowledge that they get from the clinical environments they work in, to be able to bring that into the conversations that we have in our tutorials. It's very very empowering for our students. It's very enriching as well, listening to them think through some of the challenges. Absolutely not that medical model, like you say, Lisa.
And Lisa, do you just want to add anything to this?
Yeah, totally agree with everything Narita said. And um, that curiosity they bring, the curiosity they bring of themselves, they bring of their experience, and they bring an internal motivation to learn more with inquiry based learning. The questions they ask allow the answers to fit with their view of the world and to make sense. And I think that's absolutely key. If I'm given some information and you're given some information, Nerys, our understanding, our view of the world's slightly different. So we would interpret that differently. And so we need somebody there, we need other people there, such as educators like yourself and educators such as our registered nurse experts to help the students to make sense of it.
We move on to the next one then. Why is it important to utilize technology in nurse education? Larissa, you again. I'm coming back to you first here again.
Yeah, I mean, we can't get away from the fact that technology is not only embedded in nurse education, but also within clinical practice as well. And we have to embrace that technology in order to support our students in when they finally get out into practice as a qualified member of the team. So it is important, and through things like clinical simulation that a lot of trusts offer, in order to again, it can be quite disabling using technology, so breaking that down for our students so that they can feel safe when they go out into real life situations with the patients is so important. Using virtual learning is also key in that. So it's being able to practice in that safe environment, allowing them to make those mistakes so that when they get out into say the clinical environment, they're feeling comfortable, they're feeling confident, and they're able to use the technology as well. So but it is a barrier. Some of our students, like you said, Lisa, our age group is increasing because of the nature of having to work longer in life. And it is quite scary sometimes to know that they've got to be able to use this sort of database or, that particular equipment. So if we're embracing that within our programme in nurse education and within the clinical settings, that they're embracing that, it does help break down those barriers so that, people become more computer literate, IT literate.
Lisa, what else would you like to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, technology, it's part of our life now. It's here, it's embedded, it starts in schools and it's through every sector. And you're absolutely right, Nerisse, that there's going to be gaps. And that's why our partnerships are so important, that we identify individual needs and we're able to put interventions in place to support that development if someone doesn't have previous education with certain technologies to support them, and working with a partner such as the Open University, we take that approach.
How can career changes play a role in filling gaps? And this time I'll start with you, Lisa.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. This is, oh, absolutely. The younger generation today don't make long-term career choices at 18 or 21. So they want that diversity of choice. And it may be that we don't start to see them coming through really thinking about a career in health and social care until perhaps their late 20s. And we're watching and we're learning to see what those outcomes are. But I think having the doors open, having the opportunities for people to join us with that mindset of learning is lifelong and we welcome you, is absolutely key, so that we're ready when they show an interest at any age, that we're able to say, come and join us. And so in my own organisation, I'll just briefly explain a pathway that we have. So if no one has, if we have someone who contacts us and they don't have any clinical experience, so they might contact us and have for example, a degree in teaching, but they have no clinical experience. They may want to apply for a post as a healthcare support worker, but again, they're competing against people perhaps who have skills. So they may not get the job. So we have an opportunity through our volunteering services for them to come in and volunteer through our volunteer to career pathway, where they can gain some hours in their own time to build up some of that experience that they need to then be able to apply for a post and do some what we call bank work. So it's a 0 hours contract. They work when they choose to work and give of themselves when they choose to do that, which fits around their family. But what that does is starts to build their portfolio of experience that they can then bring to interviews going forward. Now, we work with that pathway internally, so sometimes we may have interest from people working in admin roles who want to start working in clinical roles, so they may join that pathway. And we have people from the outside the organisation who step onto the volunteering and the volunteer to career pathway to then build that portfolio of experience.
Now, do you want to add anything to
Talking to other colleagues from other organisations, they have something, fairly similar in place as well, because you're absolutely right. And I think, again, a lot of what we talked about, those kind of barriers, you can become a nurse at any age these days. That there's not a problem about that. But you don't, like I said before, you don't have to do the full nursing degree. You can do bank work. You can, that you can then go on and do foundation degree, or you don't have to, do a nursing degree to become a healthcare practitioner as such. There's so many options out there, and I think we need to work with organisations to get that message out that if this is the right time for you, your kids have gone, and you want to do your lifelong ambition, but you don't know how to do that, we need to be selling that and working with organisations to get that message out, because there's so many different options and routes to go in now if you do want to change your career, and support the gaps that are out there, support practice, and anything that people can do, even on a 0-hour contract, helps those gaps and helps that support out there.
how can we attract more diverse cohorts? More diverse cohorts included attracting men into nursing. I'll start with you, Lisa.
It's about widening our net and selling what we do, and busting myths. I think people have a view of nursing. They I think we need to get out there and sell what we do, and sell the impact of what we do, and sell the positivity of what we do. We're already starting to do that as part of the work we do with our system work. We go out to schools. We take a range of practitioners out with us, from adult nursing, from mental health nursing, from children's nursing, from LD nursing. I have a male nurse in my team who's a mental health nurse, and he talks about his journey. He talks about the years that he spent giving to people as a nurse. Work experience is another. Is bringing people in to allow them to experience what we do. Where we can. There are challenges around that, but I think again that comes back down to innovation. So the work experience lead within my team works as part of a system, and for young people 14 to 16 doing their work experience, they have developed an opportunity for individuals to have a simulated and virtual week. They can't come into the services. They're too young. It's not safe. We have to think about that at that point. But we can take the practitioners to them. We can give them an interesting programme. We can give them a taster to excite them about what nursing is about. Joining as a joining a health and social programme, making that decision on leaving school, leaving full-time education, such as health and social care T-levels, qualifications, joining the workforce as a healthcare support worker, understanding the care around the patient and being part of a team, the multidisciplinary team, and the roles that different people in that team play is absolutely invaluable and part of a scaffolding approach to a journey and a career within health and social care. Taking the next step, whether that be to degree level qualification or whether that be to, for example, nursing associates, but having those role models in place to then positively reinforce how that team works to help people in their journey in healthcare. It's absolutely necessary. There's so much work going on at the moment that's really positive, and I think that we need to showcase that and build on that, because I think, and that's what you're asking. How do we not just promote it? The campaigns that are fantastic, the government with the long-term plan is fantastic, but the change agents are within the system.
Louise, you want to add anything more to this, to what Lisa said?
I think marketing, yeah, is important, but it's more than that. You know, we're living in a culture at the moment where, you know, people don't want to just see them there as a token gesture. You know, well, let's put a male nurse in a photograph in a brochure or anything like that. It's about, like you say, Lisa, positively reinforcing that, getting those stories out there, getting people to go into the schools, or, you know, when you've got the open days, you know, making sure that you've got that, those people there to be able to say, I've got a story. I've been there, you know, because, you know, we do have male students, we do have male staff nurses. When I worked in intensive care, there were actually more male nurses working in intensive care than there were females. You know, so we've all been into environments where, you know, you can say this, share your story. This is how you got to where you are. This is how we're breaking down the barriers.
With how have apprenticeships played a role in addressing nursing shortages? The both of you. So I'll start with you now, Nerys. Yeah.
It, well, in essence, it has. I mean, I think it's. I'm really passionate about the apprenticeship programs and the agenda, and it was really good to see that highlighted in the NHS workforce, you know, plan. It's, you know, given such a great opportunity for, you know, healthcare practitioners to engage with the nursing program, and be able to, in the main, support themselves financially as well, you know, working and embedding their practice via the apprenticeship agenda in their clinical settings. I see it very much two pronged as such. You know, they're given the opportunity to be able to come and do a qualification, but also I think with the apprenticeship standards that they are being supported to achieve, I think it's really also enriching the nursing education that these students are getting, that are being supported in the practice setting as well. So I think, you know, we have to embrace the apprenticeship agenda. We can see that it's certainly having an impact on the shortages that we're seeing out there, because, you know, some organisations are recruiting externally to get, you know, students into the workforce, and so it's not just the internal pocket of people that can access it. So, you know, I think it's an amazing opportunity.
And I'll just pass over to Lisa now, who is an apprenticeship person. So
Apprenticeships, the difference apprenticeships bring to working with our nursing workforce shortage. I think that the key thing that we have observed is that the individuals, the people in the system stepping onto an apprenticeship, are already embedded in the culture of the organisation. And that really brings a different view of the world and what they bring to their role, and motivation that they have within their role. I mean, being an apprentice is not easy. They have to juggle the on the job learning, they have to juggle the off the job learning, they have to be part of the workforce to be able to consolidate that learning and grow and develop and build that knowledge, skills, and behaviours in accordance with the framework. They also are part of a family, and they have work commitments as well, as part of the organisation. But I think if the organisation has that wraparound positive culture, then they grow, and we've seen this. one of our very first apprentices, we started in 2017 with a small number, as I said earlier, and our very first apprentice had never done any academic work. He had the qualifications to join the apprenticeship. He had 25 years of experience to join the apprenticeship as a healthcare support worker. And he qualified with a first degree. And he's gone on. He's moving up in his career. He's bringing that knowledge to his career, and we're seeing this more and more and more, and it's so exciting.
And the next question now, which is just for you, Lisa. We're giving Lisa a break. Just for you, Lisa. What has been the experience of Northamptonshire Healthcare Foundation Trust in utilising the levy to build a nursing workforce? So this is about the
Okay,
levy.
so the levy, yes, the money that's taken from the organisation to be held in a levy tax account, HMRC account, on a monthly basis as part of our wages bill, to be reinvested in apprenticeships for our staff for growth and development of the workforce. So at this stage, we have been able to utilise our levy across all apprenticeships. So a normal apprenticeship requires 20% as a minimum. Because nursing is a professionally regulated pathway, it requires up to 50% off the job. That's with placement and with academic study time. And it's the employer that pays the salary. So that's a challenge for employers. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about the long-term plan and the commitment to support employers with salary costs going forward. We're waiting for the government to release what that looks like going forward, because that will open doors in the future.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that response. I'll move on to you now, Nerese. How has the OU's approach helped the NHS around the country, and why is the model a success?
I mean, I think we acknowledge that we want to support our stakeholders to grow their own workforce. And I think we are really well placed in order to manage that and to respond to areas' own requirements, some of the little nuances that trusts or PVIs might have in order to send students to us to do the programme. So we can offer that flexibility. We are very much wanting to work really closely with our stakeholders, so that it's a partnership. We're delivering the theory, they're delivering the practice. It's their student, especially when you're talking about the apprenticeship side of things. As Lisa mentioned, it's not an easy qualification to do because of the layering of the apprenticeship standards that they have to meet, the requirements around the funding, and we couldn't deliver that apprenticeship programme without having those close working relationships with our organisations. And I think the fact that our programme is delivered online from the theory point of view, again, allows for those particular students to manage that work-life balance a little bit more effectively. So it allows them to plan their way through. And I think that's where our success comes from. And I know that we've had a lot of success stories. We've had students winning awards. We've got students who are saying, I never thought that I would ever be able to do this, but actually because of the flexibility of the programme, the links that I have with the organisations that I work for has allowed me to really flourish and grow and develop. And we've had students that have won RCN awards. We've got students who are doing leadership and management courses.
Thank you, thank you. I'll bring Lisa in now. Lisa, do you want to come in here?
From our registered nurse degree apprenticeship programme, we have a 99% retention rate from the nurses, from the student nurses, the apprentice student nurses qualifying and joining the organisation as their first post. And I think that's the value of what we're doing.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. That's brilliant, though. Thank you for, yes, you show that you want to be part of that question and that conversation to talk about your successes too. And that's really important for the Open University because you work in partnership together. So that's excellent. Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you. Last question. This is the last question. And this is for Lisa. What are the future plans in Northamptonshire?
Well, the apprenticeship model is embedded, and the plans are that we will continue to support apprenticeships going forwards and to build on what we do. So again, I talked earlier about virtuous circles. We learn, we stop, we look, we learn, we listen. Yeah, we listen to what our students are telling us, our apprentices are telling us. We look at the positive outcomes. We look at what they're telling us didn't work for them and what they need, and we build and we respond. And I think the model that we have is successful. It's successful because it's a trust approach. It's successful because it's a team approach, and it's successful because our apprentices are motivated to learn and achieve. And I think just leaving that question that you've asked me, and I'm with something that's really important. We all work for a salary. We have to, that's life. But we care for free.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, both of you. Heartwarming conversation. The key point that came out was in response to this long-term workforce plan is that you both recognize that there are challenges to it. That is good to have, and it's something that is it's exciting, and it highlights to us the changes that we have to make within the nursing. We talk about nursing, but within the healthcare workforce per se. But for me, it's very much is there's a couple of quotes that you both have made. Is the working the closely with stakeholders and partnership working. You said that was so key to developing nursing and taking it to that next stage. And I think you made this point, Lisa, about nursing is an occupation that happens in the real world, but that you need lifelong learning. Lifelong learning continues. And the other point you made here, which I just loved with apprenticeship, I thought that was another key point, how the apprenticeship work model is working in the OU. And that apprenticeship, they do it's a successful program you have with the Open University, but that apprenticeship care is for free. And I thought that was a wonderful call because the care they deliver is for free. And finally, for me, it's about the passion and the knowledge of what you do to you that comes across, but also about the OU model and the success stories, the many success stories that you have presented to us, that you have developed, that our students have developed and taken on further. So the OU model comes across as a strong model to take into, if you like, the next 20 odd years, the future. So can I thank you all? Thank you both. And I'll also will thank you to the audience